At my brother's wedding, my family sat me at the kitchen table, like I was just an afterthought. In that moment of quiet humiliation, I made a choice. I canceled the $20 million deal my company had with them. This isn't about revenge. It's about standing up for your worth even when the people closest to you refuse to see it. Stay with me, and I'll show you how that single decision changed everything. When you grow up in a family that doesn't see you, sometimes you have to learn to stand tall on your own. My name is Naomi Sinclair. I'm 37 years old and I run VantageLink, a company that started as an idea in my cramped studio apartment and became a leader in logistics software for major retailers across the country. It's funny. No matter how many contracts I sign or how many people I employ, there's still a part of me that wants to prove something to the people who share my last name. I grew up in the shadow of my family's construction legacy. My father, Arthur Sinclair, built our name from poured concrete and steel beams, working tirelessly until he owned half the skyline in our hometown. He's the kind of man who believed that real work meant something you could touch with your hands. For him, Caleb, my younger brother, was the natural heir, tall, athletic, eager to follow in Dad's footsteps. And me, I was the girl with her head buried in computers and code, more interested in creating digital solutions than in carrying on the family legacy. My mother, Lydia, tried to bridge the distance between my world and my father's. She would pat my shoulder and say things like, "Your father's old-fashioned, Naomi. He doesn't understand this new world you're part of." But her words always felt like a soft bandage over a deep bruise. My brother never had to hear those kinds of explanations. He belonged by default. I had to earn my place, and even then it never felt like enough. Now I'm standing on the edge of another Sinclair family event, Caleb's wedding to Vivian Halberg, the only daughter of a powerful real estate family. It's the kind of merger that would make my father proud. Two families known for their empire-building, forging an alliance over white tablecloths and expensive champagne. And for once, I'm not just attending as the awkward older sister. VantageLink recently signed a major contract with Halberg Properties. Our software will manage their entire supply chain, streamlining their vast portfolio of developments. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the thing that finally changed how my family saw me. Vivian's father had called me directly to thank me, praising my vision and the precision of my team's work. For a moment, I'd let myself believe that this wedding wouldn't just be about Caleb and Vivian. It would be about showing my family that I'd built something of my own, something they couldn't ignore. I can't help but think back to the summers when Caleb and I were kids. We'd build forts in the backyard, draping sheets between tree branches, and he'd always be the one in charge. I didn't mind then. I liked the quiet of the planning more than the performance of leadership. But I see now how those small games foreshadowed the roles we'd play for years to come. Caleb out front, charming and confident. Me in the background, always one step removed. My father used to say that our family was built on two things: loyalty and legacy. He would rest his heavy hand on Caleb's shoulder at dinner and declare, "This one's got the instinct. He knows how to carry on what we've started." I would smile tightly, swallowing the ache in my throat, because even if I was never going to be the heir, I still wanted to be seen. I think that's why this wedding matters to me in ways I can't fully explain. It's not just about Caleb and Vivian. It's about the chance, no matter how small, to be recognized as someone who mattered too. Not the girl who tinkered with computers in the basement, but the woman who built a company from the ground up, someone who turned late nights and self-doubt into something real and tangible. The wedding is set to be a grand affair at the Halberg family estate, a place I've only seen in glossy magazines and overheard conversations. I'm not nervous about the event itself. I know how to hold my own in a room full of power brokers and legacy chasers. What I'm nervous about is that old familiar feeling, the possibility that no matter what I've accomplished, I'll still be the girl they forget to mention. I've chosen my dress carefully, navy blue, tailored to fit like armor, a quiet statement of who I've become. Marcus, my partner of 2 years and a venture capitalist who understands the rhythm of risk and reward, will be by my side. He doesn't know the weight this day carries for me, at least not fully, but he knows enough to hold my hand a little tighter when my voice falters. As I pack my overnight bag, I find myself pausing over a small box tucked in the back of my drawer. Inside are old family photos, holidays and milestones where I'm always off to the side, half in the frame. I tuck it back, reminding myself that today isn't about those memories. Today is about the woman I've become and the seat I've claimed for myself in a world that once told me I didn't belong. I whisper the words to myself, like a promise I'm not here to take a seat at someone else's table. I'm here to remind them that I built my own. Growing up, the woods behind our house were my refuge. Caleb and I would run through the pines and maples until our shoes were slick with mud and our hair smelled of rain. He was always the brave one, eager to leap from fallen logs and swing across the creek on an old rope. I followed behind, careful and steady, making sure he didn't fall. Even back then, I was the caretaker, more worried about keeping Caleb safe than about getting my own feet wet. It was a role I didn't choose, but one that seemed to be assigned to me from birth. My father would watch from the back porch, coffee in hand, his gaze fixed on Caleb's daring leaps. That's the spirit he'd call out. You're going to be a leader one day. He never said that to me. Instead, he'd pat my head when we came back in drenched and breathless and say, "Good job watching out for your brother." At family parties, that same dynamic played out over and over. Caleb's soccer trophies lined the shelves in our living room. His college acceptance letter was framed on the wall like a testament to the family name, my accomplishments. Science fair wins, debate, team victories, even my scholarship to MIT were mentioned only in passing, overshadowed by whatever new milestone Caleb had reached. I learned early how to fade into the background, how to let the conversation swirl around me without demanding space for my own voice. It wasn't that I didn't try to be part of their world. When I was 22, freshly graduated and full of ideas, my father offered me a job at Sinclair Construction, an administrative role tucked behind a desk. He said it was a good way to learn the business, but I knew it was just a way to keep me out of sight. So I turned it down. I wanted to build something that was mine, not an extension of someone else's dream. Starting Vantage Link was equal parts thrilling and terrifying. My first office was my living room, where my coffee table became a desk, and my couch a makeshift bed. I spent nights coding until my eyes burned, fueled by instant noodles and too much coffee. Investors didn't line up at my door. Most of them barely listened to my pitches, dismissing me with polite nods, and the word impressive that never seemed to mean much. It felt like I was screaming into a void, trying to make them see what I saw: the potential to change how companies moved goods, how supply chains worked, how the whole system could be smarter. In those moments, the loneliness was sharper than any rejection. I'd call my mother late at night, hoping she might offer me a sliver of comfort, but her voice was always the same. "Are you still working with those computers, Naomi?" She'd ask, her tone light but dismissive. "You should think about stability. Maybe come back and help your father." As if what I was building wasn't real enough to count. What she didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that the hardest part wasn't the long hours or the empty bank account. It was the feeling that what I was doing didn't matter to anyone else. That I could work myself to the bone, pouring every ounce of my soul into my company, and still be seen as the girl playing at technology. It's a kind of invisibility that seeps into your bones, a quiet question that whispers late at night. If no one sees it, does it even exist? But I kept going. Because in the quiet of those nights, in the glow of my laptop screen, I saw something they didn't. I saw the architecture of possibility, the way every line of code could build something new, something that didn't need my father's blessing to be valid. I saw that my worth wasn't in the headlines of family newsletters or in the way my father's friends looked at me over golf club cocktails. It was in the work itself, in the late nights and early mornings, and the steady drumbeat of a vision that was all mine. It took me years to understand that no one was ever going to hand me the validation I craved. My family had their own ideas of what mattered, and I would never fit into the mold they'd created for me. So I stopped trying. I stopped measuring my worth by how much space they gave me at the table. I started measuring it by the quiet pride that bloomed in my chest when I saw the first client sign on the first real check. Clear the first time someone said, "We couldn't have done this without you." Those moments weren't loud or flashy. They didn't come with confetti or toasts in the family dining room, but they were mine. And in claiming them, I found something that went deeper than any seat at a wedding table. I found the freedom to define my own worth. I used to think that being unseen was the worst fate imaginable. But I've learned that the real tragedy is in waiting for someone else to see you, because that wait can stretch on forever. No one can give you the validation you don't first give yourself. So I stopped waiting. I decided that my work, my vision, my worth, it was all real whether my family ever saw it or not. The morning of Caleb's wedding dawned bright and unseasonably warm for early spring. I woke up before the sun, the air in my small hotel room feeling close and heavy. My navy blue dress hung on the back of the door, pressed and perfect. I'd chosen it with care, knowing exactly how I wanted to present myself. Elegant, composed, and impossible to ignore. I told myself it wasn't about proving anything, but of course it was. In some quiet part of me, I still believed that if I showed up looking every inch the woman I'd become, if I looked powerful and sure, maybe, just maybe, they'd see past the girl they'd always wanted me to be. Marcus arrived at my room with coffee and a reassuring smile. He looked impossibly handsome in his tailored suit, his easy confidence a balm against my nerves. "You look stunning," he said, brushing his thumb across my cheek. "I know today isn't easy for you, but you're not the girl in the background anymore. You've built something that matters, Naomi. Don't let them make you feel small." I smiled, but my stomach was a knot of hope and doubt. As we drove to the Hallberg estate, I watched the fields roll past in a blur of green and gold, the landscape somehow too beautiful for what I knew was waiting for me. The estate was everything I'd imagined, sweeping lawns, an old mansion that gleamed in the sun like a promise of wealth and history. Guests in pastel dresses and dark suits drifted across the marble steps, glasses of champagne already in hand. Caleb stood near the entrance, greeting everyone with the easy charm that had always come so naturally to him. He looked like he'd stepped out of one of the glossy magazines that littered the coffee tables in the family home. When he saw me, his smile was genuine, if a little distracted. "Naomi," he said, pulling me into a quick hug. "You look beautiful." Then he was gone again, swept away by a circle of older men in expensive ties, his arm draped casually around Vivian's waist as she glowed in her ivory dress. I stood for a moment, taking it all in, the soft music of the string quartet, the low hum of conversation, the laughter of people who had never known what it felt like to be invisible. My father was already deep in conversation with one of Vivian's uncles, gesturing with the easy authority of a man who'd spent a lifetime being heard. As I approached, he turned and gave me a quick nod. "Naomi," he said, his voice warm but distant. "You remember Mr. Hallberg, don't you, Caleb's father-in-law? They're talking expansion already. Caleb's going to have a lot on his plate." I nodded, offering a polite smile, but inside, I felt that old ache in my chest. There was never any question of whether Caleb could handle it. No hesitation in the way they spoke about his future. My role in this new alliance, if they thought of it at all, was incidental, a footnote in the family history. I introduced Marcus then, hoping his presence might shift the conversation. "Dad, this is Marcus Hale. He's with Sequoia Ventures." My father shook his hand, murmured a polite greeting, but his eyes slid past him, almost immediately returning to the real business at hand. In that small dismissive gesture, I felt years of family dinners where my voice had been an afterthought. Vivian approached just then, her gown shimmering in the soft morning light. She looked me over with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Naomi," she said sweetly, "I didn't expect to see you in Navy. Everyone else is in pastels. It's a shame no one told you." Her tone was light, but there was an edge to it, a flicker of something mean behind the polite words. I smiled back, refusing to let her see how deeply her words cut. "I prefer navy," I said softly. "It suits me." Her smile faltered just for a moment. "Of course. You've always done your own thing, haven't you?" She turned back to Caleb, slipping her arm through his. "Caleb, your father wants you to meet the head of the city planning board. He says it's important." Caleb barely glanced at me as they walked away together. I watched them go, feeling the weight of every moment I'd spent trying to be seen, trying to be more than the afterthought they allowed me to be. In that moment, surrounded by laughter and champagne toasts, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. It didn't matter how carefully I dressed, how much I'd built, or how hard I tried to belong. In their eyes, I would always be the girl in the navy dress, a guest at the edge of someone else's celebration. Marcus slipped his hand into mine, then grounding me. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. "I will be," I said, and I meant it. Because somewhere between the polite smiles and the casual dismissals, I felt a spark of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years, the beginning of freedom. The understanding that if they couldn't see me now, they never would. I squeezed Marcus's hand, lifting my chin as the sun broke through the clouds above us. "I'm not here for them," I said quietly. "I'm here for me." And in that single breath, I felt taller than I ever had before. The reception was already in full swing by the time Marcus and I made our way into the grand tent. The air was heavy with the scent of white roses and expensive perfume laughter rolling in waves from the tables where crystal glasses caught the light. A wedding planner with a clipboard and a tight smile approached us at the entrance. "Naomi Sinclair +1, she asked, scanning the list on her tablet. Her brows furrowed for a moment, and she tapped the screen a few times. "Ah, yes, you're at table. Let me see. Oh, table O," Marcus repeated, his voice polite but edged. The planner looked up, her smile straining. "It's a bit of an overflow arrangement. We've had an unexpected number of VIP guests arrive last minute." I felt the familiar weight settle in my chest, but I didn't flinch. "That's fine," I said calmly, though inside I could already sense what was coming. She led us down a side corridor away from the clinking of glasses and the swirl of laughter. My heels clicked on the tile each step, an echo of every moment I'd been pushed to the edges of my own family's life. Marcus's hand was warm at the small of my back, but I could feel the tension in the way his fingers pressed against my spine. When the door swung open, I saw it for what it was. Immediately, a small round table hastily draped in a white cloth shoved into a corner of the kitchen. Chefs and servers bustled past, too busy to notice us standing there, the air thick with the scent of roasted meats and fresh bread. Marcus's face hardened. "This is a mistake," he said, turning to the planner. "We're not sitting in a kitchen." The planner gave a quick, nervous smile. "It's just temporary, sir. We've had to make some last-minute adjustments for our high-profile guests. We're hoping you'll understand." I placed a hand on Marcus's arm, a silent plea for calm. "It's fine," I said quietly, even as a flicker of shame and anger burned through my chest. "Let's sit." He looked at me, searching my face. "Naomi, you don't have to accept this. You built their software system. You're not some afterthought." I met his gaze, my voice steady. "I know. But I also know how this family works. Sometimes the easiest way to fight back is to let them think you're not fighting at all." We sat down the small table, feeling like a stage for a performance I'd learned by heart. Around us, the kitchen staff moved in a well-choreographed dance, slicing vegetables, plating hors d'oeuvres, filling trays that would never come to our corner. I watched them, remembering the countless family events where I'd been the quiet observer, never the main attraction. Vivian appeared in the doorway, then her dress shimmering like liquid silver in the dim light. She tilted her head, a smile playing at the edges of her mouth. "Naomi," she said lightly, as if she'd just discovered me there by accident. "I hope you don't mind the change in seating. So many last-minute arrivals. We're just a little tight." Her tone was soft, sweet, but I could see the cold calculation in her eyes. This wasn't an oversight. It was a message. A reminder of where she thought I belonged. I smiled back a calm, practiced smile. Of course. These things happen. She let out a small, breathy laugh. I knew you'd understand. You've always been so adaptable. She gave Marcus a quick glance, her expression unreadable, before slipping back out to the warmth of the main tent. As the door swung shut behind her, I let out a slow breath. This isn't about tables, I murmured more to myself than to Marcus. It never is. I closed my eyes for a moment, and in the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw another scene, my father's hand on my shoulder, guiding me through the polished marble lobby of his company's new headquarters when I was 15. I'd thought it was a chance to learn to be part of something important, but when the speeches started, he'd pushed me to the edge of the group, smiling for the cameras as he introduced Caleb as the future of Sinclair Construction. I was just there to smile and look pretty like the fresh flowers in the lobby. Nice to look at, but never meant to be permanent. I opened my eyes and looked around the kitchen. I was no longer 15, no longer the girl who swallowed her hurt and hoped they'd change. The sting of being placed here wasn't about the table itself. It was about the lifetime of quiet dismissals that had come before it. And I realized, sitting in that folding chair with the heat of the ovens at my back, that I was done waiting for them to see me. Marcus reached across the table, his fingers warm as they curled around mine. You don't deserve this, he said quietly. I know I said my voice calm, but I'm done proving my worth to people who refuse to see it. For a moment we sat in silence, the clatter of pans and the hiss of steam filling the spaces where conversation should have been. I felt something settle in my chest, a strange sort of peace, clear and cold. They could push me to the kitchen, but they couldn't take away what I'd built, or the woman I'd become. I lifted my chin, looking past the chaos of the kitchen to the sliver of the reception I could see through the small window in the door. The music played on, the laughter rose and fell like a tide. But I didn't feel left out anymore. I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be to see everything clearly. I'm not here to be included, I said softly. I'm here to see the truth. I sat at that small kitchen table for a long moment, the clatter of dishes and the low murmur of the staff washing over me. The world outside that kitchen might have been filled with laughter and crystal chandeliers, but in that moment, everything I needed to hear was already inside me. I pulled my phone from my clutch, my fingers steady as I scrolled through my contacts. My thumb hovered over the name of my company's lead counsel, and for a breath I let myself feel the weight of what I was about to do. Not because I was afraid. It wasn't fear I felt. It was something closer to relief. A calm, resolute certainty that I didn't have to keep swallowing the disrespect they served me like a bitter pill. I hit the call button. When the line picked up, I heard the familiar voice of Allison, my general counsel, calm and professional. Even at this hour. Naomi, she said, her voice catching slightly with surprise. Is everything all right? I took a breath, glancing at Marcus, who was watching me with quiet encouragement. I need you to terminate the contract with Hallberg Properties, I said. My voice was steady, my words clear. Effective immediately. Draft the termination letter and make sure the payment reversal process is in motion. We'll cover any legal fallout. No. There was a pause on the other end. Naomi. Are you sure that's a $20 million contract? I'm sure, I said. They've shown me exactly who they are, and I won't tie Vantage Link's name to that. Make it happen. As I ended the call, I felt something in me settle. A quiet shift, like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface. I thought I might feel anger or triumph, but what I felt instead was something simpler, peace. The kind that comes from finally standing up for yourself, not because you need to prove a point, but because you're done letting someone else decide what you're worth. I set the phone down on the table and looked at Marcus. His eyes were steady, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he leaned forward, his hand warm as it covered mine. You didn't do this to punish them, he said softly. You did it because you know your worth. That's what makes this so powerful, Naomi. You're not acting out of anger. You're acting out of self-respect." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "I didn't come here today to make a scene," I said quietly. I couldn't sit there and let them treat me like I was invisible. Not when I've worked so hard to build something real, something that matters." Marcus nodded his thumb, brushing across my knuckles. "And that's exactly what you've done. You've shown them that your place isn't something they get to decide. It's something you've already claimed." I looked down at my hands, the faint tremor in them stilled now. For so long I thought if I worked harder, if I built something bigger, they'd finally see me. But they never will. And I think I'm okay with that. He smiled just a little. "That's what makes you unstoppable, Naomi. You're not asking for their validation anymore. You're giving it to yourself." I thought back to all the nights I'd spent alone in my apartment, the glow of my laptop, the only light in the room. The endless pitches that went nowhere, the investors who told me I was ambitious with a patronizing smile. I thought about how each of those moments had felt like a private battle I had to fight on my own. And now here in the heat and clatter of the kitchen, I realized that every one of those moments had built me into the woman I was. Not the woman who needed to be invited to someone else's table, but the woman who knew she could build her own. Marcus squeezed my hand, his voice low. "So, what now?" he asked. "Do you want to go back in there, or do you want to leave?" I looked at him, feeling the weight of the decision settle around my shoulders like a mantle I was finally ready to wear. "I don't need to go back in there," I said, my voice calm. "I don't need their approval or their polite excuses. I know who I am and I know what I've built. That's enough." He nodded, a small smile on his lips. "Let's get out of here then." As we stood, I took one last look around the kitchen. The bustle of the staff, the clink of glasses being polished, the distant laughter from the main tent. It all felt far away now, like an echo from a life I was finally ready to leave behind. We stepped out into the cool evening air, the sky streaked with the last pale light of the setting sun. I took a deep breath, feeling the chill on my skin like a promise of something new. I didn't know exactly what came next, but for the first time in a long time, I felt certain that whatever it was, I would face it standing tall. Because I wasn't the girl in the corner anymore. I wasn't the quiet caretaker or the afterthought. I was the woman who knew her own worth, and I had finally stopped waiting for anyone else to confirm it. The main hall was buzzing with laughter and clinking glasses when I stepped back through the doors. The music from the string quartet filled the air, weaving around the voices of people who'd never known what it felt like to be invisible. I felt every eye turn toward me as I moved through the crowd, my heels tapping out a steady rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. I didn't hurry. I didn't need to. Each step felt deliberate, measured, like I was reclaiming every inch of space they'd always told me wasn't mine. At the head table, Caleb sat with Vivian and her family, surrounded by the people who'd been invited to witness his new life. My father stood near them, deep in conversation, his hand gesturing in that confident way that had always felt so unreachable to me. Vivian caught sight of me first, her smile faltering as she watched me approach. When I reached the table, I paused. My father's laughter faded as he turned to me, his expression shifting from confusion to annoyance. "Naomi," he said, his tone tight. "What are you doing back here? You should be with your seat." I looked at him calmly, then at Caleb, whose smile had frozen on his lips. "I came to tell you something," I said, my voice steady and clear. "The contract with Hallberg Properties. It's been canceled, effective immediately." The silence that followed was almost physical, a hush that fell like a stone into a still pond. Caleb's eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing without a sound. My father's face went red, a vein at his temple pulsing. Vivian's hand tightened on Caleb's arm, her knuckles white. "You can't be serious," my father said, his voice low but dangerous. "Naomi, this isn't the time or the place. It's exactly the time I said, my voice still soft. This isn't just a contract. It's a statement about who I choose to do business with, and who I refuse to let treat me like I'm disposable. Vivian's eyes flashed, her mouth tightening as she looked away. Caleb looked like he wanted to say something, but the words never came. It didn't matter. I wasn't here to argue or explain. I was here to draw a line. Richard Halberg, who had been listening in polite confusion, leaned forward slightly. His eyes searched mine, and I could see the calculation there, the careful weighing of what this meant for him and his company. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "I see," he said quietly. "You've made yourself clear, Ms. Sinclair. And I respect that." He glanced around the table, then back at me. "It's true, you know. Silence doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it means strength that doesn't need to be shouted." My father shot him a look, his mouth pressed into a hard line, but Richard didn't waver. In that moment, I realized he wasn't just seeing me as Caleb's sister or some inconvenient relative. He was seeing me as the head of my own company, someone who could make decisions that had consequences. For the first time in a long time, I felt something settle in my chest. Not triumph exactly, but a quiet, fierce kind of peace. Like I'd finally stopped asking for a seat at their table and started building one of my own. Caleb found his voice, then his tone tight. "Naomi, why are you doing this? Do you have any idea what you're risking?" I met his eyes, and for a moment I saw the boy. He'd been the brother I'd once run through the woods with. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said softly. "I'm doing it because I won't let anyone decide my worth for me. Not anymore." His shoulders slumped, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Maybe regret, maybe understanding. But I didn't wait for him to find the words. I didn't need them. My father's voice was harsh, a hiss that barely carried over the music. "You're throwing away everything for your pride." I shook my head. "No," I said quietly. "I'm choosing my self-respect over your comfort. And that's a choice I'm finally ready to make." Marcus stepped up beside me, then his presence steady and grounding. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His hand on my back was enough a silent affirmation that I wasn't alone in this, that I never really had been. I turned my gaze back to the room, the chandeliers glinting above the swirl of pastel dresses and polished shoes. The laughter and conversation had begun to rise again, the world moving on even as the ground shifted beneath us. I realized then that I didn't feel the need to be part of it anymore. I didn't need their approval or their polite applause. I didn't need them to see me, because I could see myself, and that was enough. I straightened my shoulders, a small smile touching my lips. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," I said to the table, my tone soft but unyielding. "I have other places to be." As I turned to go, I felt Richard's eyes on me, a flicker of something like respect in his steady gaze. Vivian looked away, her face pale. Caleb watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read, but I didn't look back. Marcus and I walked out together, our steps in quiet sync. The music grew softer behind us, a distant echo of a world I was done trying to belong to. I wasn't the girl in the corner anymore. I wasn't the afterthought or the caretaker. I was the woman who had built her own table, who had chosen finally to sit at it alone if she had to. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The morning after the wedding was still and bright, the early sun turning the river outside my apartment window into a ribbon of light. I woke up to a message from Caleb. It was short, just a single line asking if we could talk. I stared at it for a long moment, my phone heavy in my hand. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let the silence speak for itself. But I knew that wouldn't be fair. Not to either of us. When we met later that day, it was in a small cafe near the river, away from the polished marble of the family estate. Caleb looked tired, shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there the day before. He didn't waste time with small talk. I wanted to say I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't realize how much you were carrying. I watched him for a moment, my coffee cooling between my hands. I'm not angry with you, I said finally. But I need you to understand something, Caleb. I didn't do what I did to hurt you, or to embarrass the family. I did it because I couldn't keep pretending that their approval was the only thing that mattered. He nodded, his shoulders slumping a little. I know. And I get it now. But Dad, he's furious. He thinks you've shamed us all. I let out a breath, steady and calm. I'm not going to apologize for demanding respect, Caleb. Not anymore. The words tasted unfamiliar on my tongue, but they felt true in a way I hadn't let myself acknowledge before. Caleb sat back, his expression resigned. I figured you'd say that, he said. And honestly, I'm proud of you for it. It wasn't an apology and it wasn't approval, but it was something. A crack in the wall that had always stood between us. I took it for what it was and let the rest go. Back at the office, the fallout from the canceled contract was already swirling. Emails and phone calls stacked up in my inbox, some cautious, some curious. But alongside the expected fallout, something else began to happen. 3 new companies reached out in the span of a week, each one referencing the decision I'd made and the principles behind it. They didn't see it as a liability, they saw it as integrity, and that was worth more than any single deal. In the quiet of my office, I felt something settle inside me. I didn't need my family's approval to keep moving forward. I didn't need the head table at their parties or the polite nods from people who would never really see me. I had my own table, my own voice, and that was enough. On a Saturday evening, when the weight of the week began to lift, I put on my walking shoes and headed down to the river. The path curved along the water, quiet except for the rustle of the reeds and the soft hush of the current. I let my mind drift back to childhood summers. Caleb and me chasing each other through the woods behind the house, the sun turning everything gold. Back then, I thought the world was small and safe, that all I needed was for my family to see me and I'd be complete. I know better now. I paused at the edge of the river, watching the water catch the last light of the day. The reflection of the sky shimmered in the ripples, a reminder that even the surface of something constant could change with the slightest breeze. I let that thought sink in, a promise to myself that I wouldn't let anyone else decide where I belonged. I'm not 15 anymore, I whispered to the water, and I will never let anyone make me feel small again. The breeze picked up, tugging at my hair, and I felt a smile pull at the corners of my mouth. It wasn't a triumphant smile. It was softer than that, a quiet affirmation of who I was and who I was still becoming. When I got home that night, I sat by the window, the city lights flickering to life around me. I thought about the road ahead, the deals and deadlines, the people who would doubt me and the ones who would try to claim my success as their own. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I was bracing for battle. I felt ready to keep building not just my company, but my own place in the world. And if my family couldn't see that, if they chose to remember only the girl who watched from the sidelines, that was their loss. I knew now that I didn't need their validation to stand tall. My worth had never been in the seat they offered me. It was in every choice I'd made to carve out a place of my own. A week after the wedding, I called my team together for a small meeting at the Vantage Link office. It wasn't the usual strategy session or project update. It was something more personal. The conference room felt intimate, the low hum of conversation fading as everyone settled in around the table. I stood at the head of the room, looking out at the people who had helped me build this company from the ground up. Some of them had been with me since those early days in my living room, when we were just an idea and a handful of half-finished prototypes. Others had joined later, bringing their own vision and drive. All of them, in their own way, had helped me remember who I was. I wanted to share something with you, I said, my voice steady. Not because it's part of a business plan or a growth strategy, but because it's a lesson that took me a long time to learn. I told them about the wedding. About the kitchen table, the choice to cancel the contract, and the quiet strength that had come from finally standing up for myself. I didn't tell the story to paint myself as a hero. I told it because I wanted them to understand that power doesn't come from the approval of others. It comes from the quiet conviction that what you build, what you give your life to, matters, no matter who sees it. We spend so much time in this world trying to be seen, I said. Trying to be enough for people who will never bother to look closely. But the truth is, we don't need them to see us to be real. We don't need their validation to know our worth. Around the table, I saw heads nodding, shoulders relaxing. It wasn't just my story. In the quiet of that room, it felt like it belonged to all of us. After the meeting ended, I lingered for a moment, watching the team drift back to their work. It felt like a small kind of magic, this sense of purpose, of connection. I realized then that this was the only approval I needed, the knowledge that I was building something that honored the work of everyone in that room. Something that had nothing to do with family legacies or bloodlines and everything to do with the value we chose to create together. That evening, Marcus and I sat on the small balcony of my apartment. The city lights flickering below us like distant constellations. He poured me a glass of wine, his movements unhurried, and then leaned back in his chair to study me. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly, walking away from them, from the table they offered you. I thought about that for a moment, the question hanging in the cool night air. "No," I said softly. "The only thing I regret is ever believing I needed to ask for a seat in the first place." He smiled, reaching over to brush his fingers against mine. "That's what I admire most about you, Naomi. You didn't just walk away. You walked forward. And you didn't wait for anyone to catch up." I let out a soft laugh, the sound mingling with the hum of traffic below. I guess I finally realized that freedom doesn't come from someone else's forgiveness. It comes from forgiving yourself. For all the years you spent trying to be small enough to fit into someone else's world. The words felt like a quiet revelation, a truth I'd always known but never said aloud. In that moment, I wasn't just telling him. I was telling myself. I was giving myself permission to stop apologizing for who I was. Later, as the night deepened and the city grew quieter, I stood at the window and looked out at the dark water of the river below. The same river I'd walked beside the night I decided to let go of the past. It shimmered under the streetlights, a reminder that everything, water, light, even the self, could shift and change with time. I thought back to the kitchen at the wedding, the clatter of dishes and the sting of dismissal. I thought about the girl I'd been all those years waiting for someone to see her. And I thought about the woman I'd become, someone who didn't just demand respect, but expected it as a given. Someone who no longer needed permission to take up space. I didn't need my family's apology to feel free. I didn't need their blessing to keep moving forward. I'd already found what I needed in the quiet certainty of my own voice and in the steady hands of the people who chose to stand beside me. As I turned away from the window, I felt a small smile on my lips. It wasn't the smile of someone who'd won or conquered. It was the smile of someone who'd finally stopped asking for permission to exist. I whispered the final words to myself, a promise I intended to keep. I'm not looking for a seat at their table anymore. I have my own, and at that table I will always belong. Have you ever felt like Naomi? Like you were fighting to be seen in a room where no one was looking? Or maybe you found your own quiet strength in the spaces where no one expected it. I'd love to hear your stories. Share them in the comments below. Because sometimes telling your story out loud can be the first step to claiming your worth. If this story spoke to you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tap the bell icon so you never miss another story about resilience, growth, and the quiet power of finding your own seat at the table. Thank you for being here. You matter, and your voice matters too.